Christ alone my hope is found. He is my light, my strength, my song. This cornerstone, this solid ground, firm through the fiercest drought and storm. What heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are stilled, when striving cease. My comforter, my all in all, here in the love of Christ I stand. In Christ alone, who took on flesh, fullness of God in helpless babe, this gift of love and righteousness, scorned by the ones he came to save, till on that cross, as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. For every sin on him was laid, here in the death of Christ.
Good evening, friends. I'm going to invite you to stand with me. We're going to sing hymn number 443. There is sunshine in my soul. As you're standing, let's sing that first verse together. There is sunshine in my soul today, more glorious and bright than glows in any earthly sky, for Jesus is my light. Oh, there's sunshine, blessed sunshine, when the peaceful, happy moments roll, when Jesus shows a smiling face, there is sunshine in my soul. We're going to come back and sing another verse of that, but greet the folks around you. Tell them how good it is to be here tonight. All right, as you find your way back to your seat, let's sing that second verse together. There is music in my soul. There is music in my soul today. A carol to my King. And Jesus listening can hear the songs I cannot sing. Oh, there's sunshine, blessed sunshine, when the peaceful, happy moments roll, when Jesus shows his smiling face, there is sunshine in my soul. Wonderful. You can be seated.
Well, thank you, Pastor Josh. That's a good song for today. Amen. Sunshine in our soul. I like it. And thank you for being here tonight on such a night as this. I was saying to our guests tonight, usually we have these things. If I plan anything special in the winter, it usually snows or we have a blizzard. And, of course, we have something like we are tonight. And what do we get? The first beautiful night of the year. But I appreciate you being here. And I think we'll have a good evening together. And, again, we had a good morning. Amen. And thank the Lord. We did have a good morning. All right, thank you. Just want to make sure. And thank the Lord for the 5 we baptized. And I think we did 6 last week. And so that's a good thing. People are still being saved. And thank God following the Lord of believers' baptism. Appreciate again you being here tonight. Let's have a word of prayer. And we are going to introduce our guests this evening. All right? Father, we love you tonight. We thank you for the opportunity to gather together. Pray, Lord, you'll bless our fellowship, bless our time. And, Lord, may we just have a learning time tonight of maybe some things we didn't know or how we can better be good stewards of your blessings in our life. We look to the future. Lord, sometimes we can think, well, I'll never make it to such an age, or maybe the Lord's going to come back, but we just don't know. And so we want to be prepared. We want to be good stewards. And so thank you for what we're going to hear tonight, and pray it'll be for your honor and glory, and we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, did anybody not pick up one of the booklets tonight as you came in, and you need one? You want to raise your hand? You say, well, it might be good information. McGinnis is here. Owen, would you help out there in the hallway there? Just grab maybe 3 or 4 of them if you would, and you come on back in with those, and we'll have them, again, handed out, and just raise the hand if you would, all right? And we'd appreciate that. Want you to get the material. You can follow along and see at least what we're talking about. Or, yeah, go help yourself if you want to do that as well. Just make sure you come back. All right. Owen, if you want to come, too, to Mrs. McGinnis up here, all right, she'd appreciate that. Anybody else need one? All right. Boy, oh boy, you're going to be moving all over the place, young man. Brother Crook's over here, Melinda Hines as well. Appreciate that. All right, Mr. Neil Clemens, you come on if you would at this time, and the mics are set up here. You grab whatever one you are going to be comfortable with, and well, yeah. Can you just use the podium? Is that all right, Matt? All right, we can do that as well, and whatever you guys want to do. Grab mics, come on up, do your thing. This is Mr. Neil Clemens, and appreciate him and his ministry, and I'm just going to let him describe it all and tell you what it's all about, and we'll spend some time together, and then when we're done, I think we got some good stuff over in the fellowship hall. So thank you so much for being here. Let's welcome him and his team to Calvary Baptist Church tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you. It's a real privilege to be here this evening. I am an independent financial advisor. I have been for 42 years. I'm not that old. I started when I was 16 in a support capacity. When I was 18, I got my license, and it's literally all that I've ever done. And really working and serving pastors in churches has been a real core focus of our practice for many, many years. And our focus for this evening is going to be on talking about really stewardship planning. We title it estate planning, but I like to refer to it as stewardship planning because oftentimes people think about the stuff that they have as opposed to other areas of their life where it's just as important to plan to make sure things flow the way that they want to, even if they don't directly involve finances. So that's part of what we're going to focus on. The other thing that I wanted to mention this evening is the focus really is very educational. And I always like to say when I'm working with a client, particularly a new client, that when it comes to some of the peripheral areas that we typically touch on when we work through the process of helping someone organize and plan their estate, we don't care so much who does the work in areas where it needs to get done. We just care that the work does get done. And so we have Mariah Hinton with us this evening. She is an attorney in our area who's going to be speaking on the legal side of things. But we also wanted to mention some of the people in the congregation who do the same type of work in terms of working with helping people organize their legal documents and making sure that things are set up in the way that they would want them to when it comes to that area. Clint Liebolt is with Critchfield and Johnson. Aaron Kick is also with a firm here in Ashland, and Rebecca Hockerberry, I believe. So they are also people that can help you with some of these areas on the legal side of things, and we wanted to make sure that we mention that. One of my associates is Todd, and Todd, if you'd like to come and share a little bit about your background.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here tonight. My name is Todd Buck. I hail from Columbus, Ohio, with my wife, and we have 2 children there, and work in financial services for the last several years. Our company is the Secure Path Advisory Group out of Columbus, and so we work in pairs. So Neil and I, fortunately or not, depending on who you ask, it's been a fantastic partnership. I work together very closely and are very involved, and looking forward to answering any questions that people might have and being able to give you education that may be useful to you. Thanks.
Super. Thank you. And I mentioned that I've been doing this for 42 years. One of the reasons that Todd and I are working together is that I've said to my clients for many, many years, because we have about 700 families as clients, that I've always wanted my transition into retirement to be a process and not an event. If it is an event, it means I didn't plan for it well, which if your financial advisor doesn't plan for their own affairs, there's probably some issues there. But that was one of the reasons that last year we actually merged together with an office out of Columbus so that we have a very clear plan in terms of succession planning and making sure that those clients that have entrusted us with helping them in this area of their lives don't have to worry about what happens if I'm not there anymore. So that was one of the reasons that Todd and I were kind of working together. So next slide, if we could, please. So yes, I've given you an overview of us. As far as Mariah, she is with Equins Law Group, and she works primarily in business law and estate planning, as well as real estate matters. Mariah will be joining us on the podium here in just a little bit as we get into more of the legal side of things as well. She grew up in Holmes County and currently lives in Smithville with her husband, Todd, and their twin girls, and she has been with Equise since 2018. So that's a little bit of background on us. Next slide, please. Yes, these are the different offices that we work out of. So there's a wide range of places where we will meet with clients. And then next slide, please. And this is really where we get into there we go. Yeah, I'm gonna, so I can turn around and look a little bit here. This is where we get into our values, who we are, what we do, and what I believe makes us a bit different when it comes to the area of estate planning. Really, the thing that I think makes us a bit different is that when we work with clients, the number one characteristic that we always strive for is integrity. We tell you what we're going to do, and we follow through, and we do it. Many of our clients, particularly working in this environment, are coming from a very strong faith background. And it's interesting, oftentimes when people work with a financial advisor, they may not get many questions about how their faith may impact their planning in this area of their life. I feel it's critical on multiple levels, and we'll get into some of those a little bit later. But we are very much attuned to that for our clients who are coming from a faith perspective. And then also, we're very big on relationships. Oftentimes what I find is that if somebody has an existing relationship with an attorney or an accountant or some other professional that is working in a related area to the area that we focus in, we're more than happy to interact with that person. Our goal is not to interrupt relationships that you may have in different areas. Our goal is to help you coordinate those so that they're working together in an efficient way. Because I find in the 42 years that I've been in this business that the overwhelming majority of people look at their financial life as an unrelated series of transactions. And that's not the way that it is. Oftentimes when people will come to us, they may have a retirement plan through their current employer. They may have one or two orphaned retirement plans with former employers that they never got around to doing anything with when they left those jobs, along with a number of other financial instruments that they've acquired in their personal life from different sources at different times for different reasons, none of which is communicating with one another. And I would suggest that the decisions that you make in one area of your financial life can and often do impact other areas of your financial life. So if you don't have somebody that you're working with who's really helping you take an inventory of those things, helping you identify and prioritize the goals that are important to you, and just making sure that that is taken care of, the outcome is not as likely to be as favorable as it could be. Super. And these are some of the different areas that we would typically touch on. Financial planning, insurance planning, Medicare planning, long-term care planning, investment management. These are all areas that we would touch on. And how do we know what applies to you? We use an intake form where someone can just give us an overview of what does their current circumstances look like. And making sure that we're familiar with that, and then from there we begin a conversation about what are your goals, what are you hoping to accomplish, and then being able to work with that family to make sure that we are projecting out their current pattern and helping them to see whether their current course of action is likely to get them where they intend to be. Next slide. So goals for today, I mentioned provide some helpful information, demonstrate the importance of good planning, and provide an opportunity for specific questions. You want to talk about it?
As Neil had said, you could go with just about anyone to coordinate in all areas or aspects of your life. But the first thing I would note is on the one slide it said that we work with people, not money. So that would be if to give you something educational to take away, you want someone who is a fiduciary. You want somebody whose your best interest is in mind. So if you write that word down, fiduciary, you certainly do. And the secular view versus the Christian view would be the kind of other way to look at that, which I think kind of helps us stand out. One of the things that Neil, I don't think mentioned, but that when our companies merged together, he was very specific about making sure that we philosophically agreed, that our companies agreed. So, and so looking at this slide kind of sets that out there as the secular view. If I have a client who sits down with me and they're most interested in talking to me about very specific stocks that they have in their portfolio, and they want to get in the weeds about every little we can do that. We can have those conversations, but I'm much more comfortable with getting to know you as a person and getting to know your goals as a family, getting to know what beneficiaries, where do you want to go, how do you want to get there, and then helping you to coordinate for that to happen. So instead of pushing it off just so that you become successful individually, how can we say, you've been awarded these things, God has given us these blessings, how can we be good stewards of them? A secular view of ownership, I am responsible for my success. But a Christian view, God's responsible for the success that I'm called to be faithful with. And so having someone who can sit down and have that conversation with you, building that into your plan. I'm responsible to no one for what I do with my own property, or the Christian view, stewardship. God holds me responsible for what I do with his property. So it's just a way of kind of showing how we view how we work with our clients.
Jesus spoke about money more often than he did heaven and hell. Anybody want to take a guess what the ratio is? I heard one that was close. It's about 3-1. About 3-1. Jesus talked about money and possessions 3 times more often than he did heaven and hell. Is that because money and possessions are more important than heaven and hell? No. But I think that certainly Christ knows our hearts. He knows what competes for our loyalties. And I think that it's important to be aware that, yes, we are responsible for managing those things that we have been entrusted with well. But I would also mention that there are a number of people that we can think of, particularly in the Old Testament, that when we hear the names, the first thing that we think about is their faithfulness and their walk with God. Abraham, Job, there are others that were among the wealthiest people on the planet in their day, and yet we think of them for their faith walk. So it isn't impossible to be faithful to being a good steward and having resources, but it certainly isn't easy. I think it takes some intentionality to make sure that we are keeping our priorities in the right place and also that we're managing what we've been entrusted with well. So let's talk a little bit about what is estate planning. Todd, you want
Yeah, what and why is estate planning important? How should your faith be affected in this area? So estate planning it's the process of organizing your financial and legal affairs in a way that achieve your goals. Earlier, I was telling someone that we do large-scale farm plans for people, and so oftentimes it's a farm that has gone through maybe generations, and we just think that it's going to pass down very seamlessly to our family. Until someone starts asking the kind of difficult questions and say, well, if, one of the examples I always give is we have 3 kids and one farms and the other 2 don't, and you pass away, what happens, right? And they say, well, our son's going to continue to farm it, but what if the other 2 kids want to cash out? How does that work? And so that's just one example in terms of estate planning, but putting each and every one of these issues that are things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis and actually coordinating them together along with finances, along with your house, along with your accounts and things that you have, and to be able to figure out to have somebody kind of quarterback that for you.
Yeah, and before we go any further, something I should have mentioned at the very beginning. Included in the handout, there is an evaluation form. And something that we find very regularly when we do presentations like this is that oftentimes people will have questions that may not be either appropriate to ask in front of a group or that we would just need to get much more background information before we could responsibly respond to it. So if you could fill out the evaluation form, there's 2 promises that I make to you. Number 1, if you don't want to hear from us, we're not going to call you. I promise that. But part of what we offer to the congregations when we do these presentations is that if you do have questions and you'd like to come in and talk with us or arrange a meeting, we will make a 1-hour complimentary session available with either myself or Todd and or Mariah to answer your questions about some of these things where we can actually get the level of information that we need to be able to respond to them. So if you want to be filling that out along the way, there's also an opportunity for you to offer some input in terms of the content of the presentation. So just so you're aware of that. Steps in estate planning. Well, the first thing that we need to do is take an inventory of where you currently are. And so often I find that people don't really think about organizing this area of their lives. But when they come to us, the first thing that we need to do is understand what the current picture looks like. So that's the very first thing that we do. The next thing that we do is to have a conversation with the client about what are your goals, what's important, what are your concerns, what areas of your financial life don't you really feel confident about right now, and how would you like those things to look? And then that leads into the next phase of designing a plan, where Todd or myself and Mariah would be able to offer input. Not only talk about your current situation, but what are the steps that we need to make the improvement that you would like to see, so that those things are organized and as well prepared as possible for the unexpected. And then certainly the next step is not only to design the plan, but then to come to the client, outline what steps need to be taken in order to make improvement, and then guide them through the process step by step of making sure that those things are implemented.
One of the things that we often do is meet with our clients at least annually. And so again, not necessarily with us, but if you have a relationship with someone, this is another, I had this conversation with someone out at the table. It's, yes, I have a relationship with someone, but I haven't talked to him in a few years. I've tried to get a hold of him. I can't get a hold of, that sort of thing. And that's something I think we pride ourselves on, is just the ability to have somebody that will get back to you, that you can connect with when something should come up and it is needed.
Some of the areas that we would address when it comes to estate planning, I'm sorry, I wasn't quite finished with that one. There we go, thanks. Net worth statement, just taking an inventory of where you are right now, what you have. Number two, the number one reason I would say that people typically come to us as financial advisors is they're beginning to get to that phase of life where they're really beginning to ask the question, are we ready for retirement? Are we on track? So that's the number one report that we typically will include in a financial plan, is pulling together some reasonable projections to help people get an idea of whether they're really on track for that. We would also take a look at how they're currently invested. There are some different tools that we use to measure how conservative or aggressive a client may really be when it comes to their investments, and being able to help them take a look at how they're currently invested and whether those two things match. We would also take a look at, do an audit on their life insurance, their health insurance, their disability, if they have long-term care, or if they even need those things. Not everybody needs them. And then, of course, I would say we actually lead with the legal document review. Anytime that we are doing a financial action plan, which is a bullet-pointed summary after having spoken with a prospective client about areas of need that they might have, if they've not already taken steps to make sure that their legal documents are in place and are current, that's the number one thing that we will have listed. Because from a financial advisor's perspective, there aren't too many areas that I can look a client in the eye and say, it is not a question of if, it is only a question of when you're going to need these. But certainly the legal document review is one of those. 70% of the population doesn't have a will, and of those that do, probably about 70% of those are outdated. So if you're sitting here tonight and thinking to yourself about whether your legal documents, if they are in place, accurately reflect what your current wishes are, there's only about a 10% chance that those things are really aligned in the way that the average person would really want them to be. So, next slide, please. Thanks. And this is kind of a hierarchy. This slide is in your handout that shows the hierarchy, if you will, of the areas that we typically would look at in order of importance, from the foundational all the way up to the more advanced. So. And
I just would note on here, when I look at this slide, I think of all of the different things that we don't often think about until someone puts this slide in front of you and you go, oh, and as time travels on and the law changes and things of that nature, it's good to have somebody on your team or in your corner that is following each and every one of these things, because we know, because we do this every day, just like you do in your own professions, we know kind of the ins and outs on things that might be of benefit to you.
Next slide. Thank you. So how do you design and implement your plan? Well, you certainly can work through the process yourself, but if this isn't an area that you really are active in, the likelihood of missing something is very significant. Or you can work with a team of professionals, and certainly I think that that provides a much more certain outcome.
Yeah, and kind of like the slide that I talked about before, again, with our focus on what we do, we are able, different than other places probably, to be able to focus in on Christian values versus just specific financial planning. Different goals, different standards, listening to our clients, and instead of just hearing what they have to say once and then doing our own thing, actually going through and figuring out what makes most sense for them. We are able to do things like avoid the areas that are listed there, along with any other area that might be of interest for you, to be able to meet a plan that really is specific and focused on what it is that you would like to do.
And really what we're talking about is what I would define as stewardship investing. And oftentimes people are not even aware that this can be done. But stewardship investing is when your moral values and beliefs affect your investment decisions. There are actually ways that if clients want to avoid certain industries, that we can actually filter the portfolio so that their retirement plan that they go to work and contribute to on Monday morning is not in conflict with the values that are preached from the pulpit on Sunday morning. And if that is something that is important to a client, that is an area that we've actually had the capacity to be able to implement for 25 years. But again, this is the kind of question that oftentimes you don't even get from your financial advisor.
So in the basics of finance, budgets are important. That's, as you can see up there. The vast majority of people that we speak with, if we're being completely honest, do not write down or have a budget specific to every single thing. And so oftentimes we'll do retirement reports for someone, and we always do a second set of reports, and there's a really specific reason to do that, because when someone comes back the first time, they say those numbers don't always look right, and I say, well, that's because your budget isn't where you said it was. And so then we have to sit down and actually go through and say, this is really what's kind of taking place there. But we all can kind of fall victim to that, and so it's a responsibility to make sure that we have our budget. Being proactive rather than reactive. I think that kind of goes exactly with what it says. Looking out for what might take place. And obviously, past performance is not, guarantee of future results, and we know that, and you hear that. But there are things that we can kind of see that take place that we may be able to speak to prior to it becoming something that is an issue for you or for our clients. And taking an inventory that's present in future needs and goals. That's the number one thing, is making sure that we are having a relationship with you. We have a relationship with your family as well. We have a trusted contact for you who can call us and get information about you or about our clients, not make transactions on your behalf without the proper documentation, but be able to just somebody who we would be able to speak with on your behalf, and we know that because we have a relationship with you.
Absolutely. And with that, we will ask Mariah to come. Just as an overview, we're going to have Mariah talk a bit on the legal side, and then when that is finished, we're going to move to the fellowship hall for refreshments, and then we will talk a little bit about some case studies, try to apply to very common profiles of situations, some of the steps that people really would be well advised to take, and then open it up for question and answer as well. So, Mariah.
Thank you, Neil. As Neil had said, my name is Mariah Hinton. I work with Equus Law. We're out of quite a few different locations, but the reason I'm here today is to educate and empower. That's something that's very important to my firm. So we have no hard feelings at all. If we don't speak to you again after this, I love to be able to talk about why these things are in place, because I've seen it in countless people's lives where if they don't have something in place and a tragedy strikes, then it just makes things that much worse for their family. So I grew up in Holmes County. My husband actually grew up in New Pittsburgh, just 15 minutes from here. So he and our 1.5-year-olds are out with family over there down in New Pittsburgh area. So if my hair looks a little frizzy today, it's because we were out playing with water, as you do apparently with 1.5-year-olds. They're keeping us on our toes already. But The first document we're going to talk about today is a will. Last will and testament is another phrase that you would commonly hear about a will. So this is the document that explains who you want your assets, your property, anything that you own to go to when you pass away. Also in the document, you explain who your executor is, so who's going to be the one to be in charge of this. And I will say, it's not really a job that people are fighting over to do. It's important to have this designation because it's a responsibility, a big responsibility. And I work with people of all different ages, all different economic statuses, and you'll see, just in general, which is wise to at least do this, very common to have individuals come through once they're young, whether they're married or not, but especially so once they're having children, they're realizing, okay, I need something set up. I want to have a guardian listed. Maybe you have different siblings, different aunts and uncles, and you don't want there to be a situation where, okay, who's taking care of my children, and the terrible event that a tragedy would strike me and my spouse. So very common and very wise at that point of your life to have a will, if for no other reason than to make sure it's clear who would be responsible with raising your children. I know for my family, we have people who are in different faith walks, maybe some who wouldn't quite raise our children in church like we would want them to, and so that's dictated who our guardian appointment was for our kids. And then about at least 10, 15 years later, it's wise to take a look at things ever so often more than 10 to 15 years, but it's very common then to have people come in once their kids are in school or have graduated, because at that point, who you've chosen your executors to be 10, 15 years ago might not be the people you want anymore. It might be after college or somewhere around there that you are comfortable having your child listed in that authority. And then again, about 10, 15 years later, maybe once you have grandkids, or again, maybe you're getting close to retirement, circumstances in your life changing, it's always wise to take a look at these documents, including your last will and testament, to see if they're up to date and to see what changes that you might want to make. So that's the will, very important. Everybody should have one. I'll summarize that with that. The next document we'll talk about is a living will. It could also be referred to when you hear people talking about advanced directives, then this is what they're talking about. And this document is pretty specific. We're going to talk about healthcare power of attorney in just a minute. And this is not that. So this is in the situation where you are in a permanently unconscious state or a terminal condition, and not just being diagnosed with a terminal condition, but when it's towards the end. It's very clear. You have the document itself will explain at least 2 doctors have come to the decision that artificial support or nutrition will no longer provide you suffering or provide you assistance from suffering. Then you are explaining in what cases you do not want to be kept artificially alive and want to be able to pass naturally. It's not a fun document to talk about, not a fun document to think about, but if you are in that situation, you're wanting to make it as clear to your children or grandchildren or whatever family members that might be what your wishes are. So it's one less decision off of their shoulders, so to speak. So this is only in those situations towards the end of life. So it's not saying that you don't want CPR. It's not saying you don't want a DNR in general. That's what I like to also kind of explain through that process too. But it is important if you do want to make sure that in those situations you want to be able to pass naturally, that you would want to think about this living will declaration or a living will. The next one is powers of attorney, financial powers of attorney. Some places will just say powers of attorney, but it is different from a healthcare power of attorney. So if you have one, you're not necessarily going to have the other. Again, if you've already made an estate plan, it's a good time to look through and see exactly what documents you have. So a power of attorney document, again, it's something that you want to think about no matter your age and no matter your status, because unfortunately, we obviously don't know what the future holds. Only the Lord does. And so for both as a young person wanting to think about it is in the event that there would be an accident where for any period of time you can't make decisions, pay your bills, then it's important to have a power of attorney that appoints an agent to take actions for you as the principal. So you are the principal, you're the one creating the document and giving the authority to your agents, also known as your attorney in fact, to make decisions for you. So this is, like I said, if there's an accident and you're unconscious for a while in a coma, this person would be able to act on your behalf and make sure things are handled for you. There's also later on in life, you might, if you of course don't get in an accident, but maybe have some sort of dementia or other inability to make your own decisions. This is another time that your power of attorney would step in. And a good reason to do this is to avoid having to have a guardianship appointed for you through the probate court. That's a more rigorous process, a longer process. I will say I do have not a lot of situations, thankfully, but sometimes people who feel like they don't have kids or grandkids and they're single and they don't trust anybody to be their agent under the power of attorney, and that's very important. You do want to be able to trust this person. Then a guardianship is not going to be the end of the world, because this is going to be a court-appointed person who's going to be able to take care of that person as a guardian. So that's a little bit of a side note, but just something to kind of keep in mind. A healthcare power of attorney, then, is another power of attorney document. As the wording says, this is related just to your healthcare decisions. So this person would be able to act for you to the same extent that you would be able to dictate your healthcare decisions at any time that you are unable to. So it's definitely something that, there could be a time for a few days when you're in the hospital for a procedure and the doctors, because you're unable to communicate, need to speak with your agent to make decisions to speak through on that period of time. Or again, it could be something similar to the financial power of attorney, where towards the end of life where you don't have capacity to speak for yourself or dictate what you want your healthcare decisions to be, then this agent would be able to speak up for you instead. Just another tidbit as far as if you're thinking about these documents, this person who you've appointed as your agent, and I always recommend having an alternate or maybe two just in case, because generally if you're married, we list the spouse first, but you never know if something also has happened to your spouse. You want to have a backup. And being an attorney and always wanting to be overprotective, we always recommend a backup to your backup if possible. But if you're speaking from the, or even if it's your parents or grandparents, there could be people that they're appointing. The person under their financial power of attorney might not be the same child, for instance, that they've selected to be their agent under their healthcare power of attorney. These are not, they don't all have to be the same, or even the person that's your executor. What I recommend thinking about is for your financial power of attorney, if you have a child or a relative or a friend that's more savvy with finances and can balance a checkbook, at least knows generally where your accounts are. And again, this is good. We're working with a financial advisor, can help tremendously as well. But that person might be who you appoint as your agent, whereas a child who's living really close to you or already taking you to your doctor's appointments might be the one that you've listed on your healthcare power of attorney documents. So just keep in mind, they don't have to be the same people listed on all these documents or in the same order. But that's the power of attorney. And then a trust then. This is kind of more involved into the estate planning process. So a trust is usually drafted by an attorney, and we are wanting then to put the assets into the trust. Think of it like a suitcase. You're putting the assets into this entity, where for a living trust, you are still in control of it during your life. You're able to put your assets in it, you're able to take them out of it, and then once you pass, the trust becomes irrevocable. Nobody can change it anymore. They have to follow the terms of it, of course, which is what you want to have happen. There is no complete bright line test of when somebody should have a trust. This is where, again, speaking with your advisors, your accountants, your attorney, or in the event that, again, you're doing a follow-up with the advisors today would be a helpful piece of the puzzle. But one of the things to look for is if you do want to make sure that if you have a larger estate, you don't want your kids or grandkids to have access to a lot of money right away at one time. You want to try to help them be good stewards of their money and disperse it over a period of time, or hold it in trust for specific events, or any certain, there could be situations, again, where you've got one child that's going to be operating the business or the farm, and then others that are going to be receiving more assets. So you can be more specific with a trust. And there are even situations like my parents have 7 kids, myself included. I'm begging them to set up their trust. I do not want to be executor of an estate with 7 children without a trust, because we will be in probate court for a while. So that's just one of the considerations. There are many to think about in the possibility of setting up a living trust. The last document, or the last slide that I have here, is an irrevocable trust. And I'm just going to touch on these because we don't see them come into play too often. This would be in the situation where you really want to make sure your assets are protected. Some people will come to this because they want to protect their assets from Medicaid, and they haven't set up long-term care insurance, which you saw mentioned on a previous slide. There's always exceptions to every rule, but in general, that can be an avenue for putting assets in this trust to protect against Medicaid's estate recovery program. I will note, not every attorney does advanced Medicaid planning. We generally look at the circumstances and then see if it's something that falls under our office, or if not, we have great Medicaid attorneys that we refer you guys to. But this is an option out there, not used very often, because once you put the assets in, you can't take them out. That's for the purpose of the protection. So that's the last slide that I have, and then I think we've got some case questions.
Yeah, actually, I think what we'll do is go ahead and move over to the fellowship hall and collect the refreshments, and then we'll touch on some case studies along with opening it up for questions and answers. Thank you.